Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. The American Revolution wasn't just a fight for freedom on a distant continent, it sent shockwaves far beyond the shores of the 13 colonies. It ignited ideas that challenged monarchies, redefined what it meant to govern, and inspired revolutions around the world. From the fiery protests of the Boston Tea Party to the signing of the Declaration of Independence and the fierce battles that followed, this conflict reshaped not only a nation, but the very foundations of modern democracy. In this video, we'll explore how the revolution's impact stretched across oceans, influencing political thought and sparking movements from Europe to Latin America. We'll also dive into the ideals that fueled the fight and trace how those ideas continue to shape societies today. Stay with us as we unravel the profound and lasting legacy of America's fight for independence, because this story is about far more than just battles. It's about the birth of new possibilities for freedom and justice worldwide. The seeds of the American Revolution were planted long before the first shots were fired. At the heart of the conflict was a growing frustration among colonists over taxation without representation. The British government imposed taxes like the Stamp Act and the Townshend Acts without giving the colonies a voice in Parliament, sparking outrage and protests. These policies seemed unfair and oppressive, especially as Enlightenment ideas about individual rights and self-governance were spreading, inspiring colonists to question the authority of the crown. Tensions escalated, with a series of dramatic and violent events that galvanized colonial resistance. The Stamp Act of 1765 triggered widespread protests, boycotts, and even riots, signaling that the colonies were no longer willing to accept British control without pushback. In 1770, the Boston Massacre further inflamed passions when British soldiers opened fire on a crowd of angry colonists, killing 5 and fueling anti-British sentiment. Then came the iconic Boston Tea Party of 1773, where disguised colonists dumped an entire shipment of British tea into Boston Harbor, defiantly challenging British economic policies. Amidst this growing unrest, key figures emerged who would shape the revolution and the future of the United States. George Washington, a seasoned military leader, rose to command the Continental Army, embodying the resolve and discipline the colonists would need. Thomas Jefferson, a brilliant thinker and writer, crafted words that would inspire a nation, most famously in the Declaration of Independence. Opposing them was King George III, whose determination to maintain control over the colonies set the stage for the inevitable clash. These people, along with countless others, stood at the crossroads of history as the colonies moved from protest to revolution. The revolution truly ignited in April 1775 with the battles of Lexington and Concord, the first armed clashes between colonial militias and British troops. The shot heard round the world marked the start of open conflict, as colonial fighters stood their ground against one of the world's most powerful armies. Over the next several years, the war ebbed and flowed with key battles shaping its course. One of the most critical turning points came in 1777 at Saratoga, where American forces delivered a decisive victory over the British. This triumph was more than just a battlefield success. It convinced France to formally enter the war as an American ally. French military and financial support, along with aid from Spain and the Netherlands, transformed the revolution into a global conflict and greatly strengthened the colonial cause. The infusion of international support provided much-needed resources, troops, and naval power, tipping the scales in favor of the Americans. After years of fierce fighting, hardship, and sacrifice, the war culminated in 1781 with the Siege of Yorktown. American and French forces surrounded British General Cornwallis's army, forcing his surrender and effectively ending major combat. The victory at Yorktown was a stunning confirmation that the colonies could win their independence. The conflict officially concluded with the Treaty of Paris in 1783, where Britain formally recognized the sovereignty of the United States. This treaty not only marked the end of the war, but also laid the groundwork for a new nation, one founded on revolutionary ideals that would inspire generations to come. The American Revolution had reshaped the political landscape, setting a precedent for liberty and self-determination across the globe. The American Revolution's impact stretched far beyond the borders of the new United States. It became a beacon of hope and inspiration for oppressed peoples and revolutionaries around the world. In France, just over a decade later, the ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity exploded into the French Revolution of 1789. The French Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen echoed many of the principles laid out in the American Declaration of Independence, asserting that all men are born free and equal, and that governments derive their power from the consent of the governed. The American example showed that deeply entrenched monarchies and aristocracies could be challenged and even overthrown. Across the Atlantic, in the Caribbean, the American Revolution also inspired one of the most significant slave revolts in history. The Haitian Revolution, which began in 1791, was led by enslaved people seeking freedom and justice. Fueled by Enlightenment ideas and revolutionary rhetoric, the enslaved population of Saint-Domingue fought fiercely against French colonial rule. Their success not only resulted in Haiti becoming the first Black republic and the second independent nation in the Americas, but also sent shockwaves through slaveholding societies around the world. In Latin America, leaders like Simón Bolívar looked to the American struggle for independence as a model for their own liberation movements. Bolívar and other revolutionaries cited the U.S. Revolution as proof that colonial powers could be defeated and that new nations could be born from the fight for self-determination. Throughout the early 1800s, waves of independence movements swept across Spanish and Portuguese colonies, reshaping the map of the Western Hemisphere. Ultimately, the American Revolution was more than a local uprising. It was a powerful demonstration that entrenched colonial powers could be challenged, and that ideas about freedom, democracy, and human rights could spread and take root worldwide. It set a precedent that reverberated across continents and generations, shaping the course of history in profound and lasting ways. The American Revolution didn't just change the map, it fundamentally reshaped political systems worldwide by introducing the concept of a republican government based on written constitutions. For the first time, a nation was founded on the idea that sovereignty belonged to the people rather than a monarch or ruling elite. The U.S. Constitution, with its innovative system of checks and balances, separation of powers, and protection of individual rights, became a groundbreaking model for governance that others sought to emulate. This experiment in self-rule inspired the spread of democracy far beyond America's borders. Across Europe and the Americas, movements began advocating for more representative governments and greater participation by ordinary citizens. The idea that government legitimacy comes from the consent of the governed challenged centuries of monarchic and imperial rule. Moreover, the revolution's emphasis on natural rights and liberties fueled growing demands for civil rights and freedoms. It laid the ideological foundation for later movements pushing for abolition of slavery, expanded suffrage, and women's rights. While the United States itself struggled with contradictions, such as slavery and the exclusion of women, the principles enshrined in its founding documents became rallying cries for justice and equality worldwide. In essence, the American Revolution planted the seeds for modern democracy and civil rights. It showed that governments could be designed to serve the people and protect their freedoms, and that those freedoms were worth fighting for. This political legacy continues to influence struggles for justice and governance reforms around the globe today. The American Revolution didn't just transform politics. It also reshaped the economic and diplomatic landscape of the Atlantic world. With independence secured, the United States emerged as a new trade partner, eager to expand commerce and build its economy. Freed from British mercantile restrictions, American merchants and entrepreneurs began forging direct trade relationships not only with Europe but also with the Caribbean, Latin America, and beyond. This newfound economic freedom allowed the young nation to grow rapidly and establish itself as a key player in transatlantic trade networks. At the same time, Britain's economic dominance in North America took a significant hit. Losing the in 13 colonies meant the loss of vast markets and resources, forcing Britain to recalibrate its global economic strategy. The British economy, heavily reliant on colonial trade, faced disruption, and London shifted its attention toward consolidating and expanding its influence elsewhere. This shift contributed to changes in European colonial policies and strategies. With the American colonies gone, Britain increasingly focused on its remaining empire, particularly in Asia. The British intensified their control over India, investing more resources and administrative power to secure their position as a global imperial force. Other European powers also took note, adapting their colonial approaches in light of the revolutionary upheaval in the Americas. Diplomatically, the revolution altered alliances and rivalries. France's support for the American cause strengthened its position against Britain, but also strained its finances, contributing to the conditions leading to the French Revolution. Spain and the Netherlands likewise adjusted their policies, seizing opportunities to regain or expand their influence in the shifting colonial order. In short, the American Revolution accelerated the decline of British economic supremacy in North America and prompted a broader realignment of colonial ambitions and diplomatic relationships. It marked the beginning of a new era in global trade and empire building, one where the United States would soon emerge as an influential force on the world stage. The American Revolution is often celebrated as a struggle for liberty and justice, but it was also marked by profound contradictions. Most glaringly, the fight for freedom unfolded while millions of people remained enslaved. Many of the revolution's leaders, including George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, owned enslaved people even as they championed ideals of liberty and natural rights. This contradiction highlighted a deep tension at the heart of the new nation. The promise of freedom was not yet extended to all. Yet the revolution planted seeds that would eventually fuel abolitionist movements both in the United States and across the Atlantic in Britain. The language of equality and human rights gave abolitionists powerful tools to challenge slavery's moral and legal foundations. Over the following decades, these ideas helped spark growing campaigns to end the slave trade and emancipate enslaved people, although progress was slow and fraught with resistance. Meanwhile, the Haitian Revolution, which erupted just a few years after America's independence, directly connected to the contradictions and ideals of the American struggle. Enslaved people in the French colony of Saint-Domingue drew inspiration from the rhetoric of liberty and the example of rebellion. Their successful revolt became the first and only instance where enslaved people overthrew their colonizers to establish a free republic. This extraordinary revolution sent shockwaves through the Americas, challenging assumptions about race, freedom, and power, and forcing the United States and other nations to confront the complexities of slavery within revolutionary ideals. The American Revolution's legacy regarding slavery is complex. It sparked ideals of freedom that inspired generations, yet it also exposed deep inequalities that would fuel conflict and struggle for centuries to come. Understanding this contradiction is essential to grasping the full story of America's founding and the ongoing fight for true equality. The legacy of the American Revolution continues to echo powerfully in modern global politics, shaping the way nations understand freedom, democracy, and their own identities. From its earliest days, the United States developed a sense of American exceptionalism, the belief that America has a unique role and responsibility to promote liberty and democracy around the world. This idea has driven U.S. foreign policy for centuries, inspiring efforts to support democratic movements and institutions internationally. Throughout the 20th and 21st centuries, the United States has often positioned itself as a defender of freedom, using its influence to encourage democratic governance, human rights, and the rule of law. Whether through diplomacy, economic aid, or military intervention, America's revolutionary roots have shaped its global ambitions and responsibilities. This revolutionary spirit continues to inspire modern uprisings and political movements. The Arab Spring, for example, saw people across the Middle East and North Africa demanding democratic reforms, drawing on universal ideas of freedom and self-determination that trace back to the ideals first championed by the American Revolution. Similarly, the wave of revolutions that swept through post-Soviet states in the late 20th century often cited America's struggle for independence as a symbol of hope and possibility. While the outcomes of these movements have varied widely, the enduring influence of the American Revolution's principles is clear. It set a standard for challenging authoritarian rule and envisioning a world where governments are accountable to their people. The revolution's legacy lives on, reminding us that the fight for democracy and freedom is ongoing, and that history's lessons remain relevant in shaping today's world. While the American Revolution is often hailed as a monumental victory, for freedom and democracy, its legacy is far more complex and contested. The ideals of liberty proclaimed in 1776 did not extend equally to everyone. Indigenous peoples, for example, faced continued displacement, broken treaties, and violence as the new United States expanded westward, Many native nations suffered devastating losses despite their varied roles during the conflict. Loyalists, colonists, who remained loyal to the British Crown, found themselves on the losing side, often forced to flee their homes, lose property, and endure social ostracism. Their stories complicate the narrative of a united colonial struggle and reveal the internal divisions within American society. Most starkly, millions of enslaved Africans remained in bondage long after the Revolution, highlighting a glaring contradiction in the new nation's claim to universal freedom. While revolutionary rhetoric inspired abolitionist movements, the practice of slavery persisted and even expanded in certain regions, underscoring how economic interests often overshadowed the ideals of liberty. These realities challenge the myth that the revolution immediately delivered freedom and equality to all. Instead, it laid the groundwork for ongoing struggles, legal, social, and political, to realize those promises more fully. Understanding these complexities helps us appreciate that history is never simple. The American Revolution was both a bold step forward and a reminder of the work still to be done in the pursuit of true justice. The American Revolution fundamentally reshaped the world in ways that continue to resonate today. It wasn't just a colonial rebellion or a war for independence. It was a powerful catalyst that inspired countless movements for freedom, democracy, and human rights across the globe. From the storming of the Bastille in France to the fight for independence in Latin America and the revolutionary upheaval in Haiti, the ideals first proclaimed in 1776 sparked a worldwide wave of change. But the revolution was not the end of the story. It marked the beginning of an ongoing global struggle for self-rule and justice. The principles it championed continue to inspire people facing oppression and authoritarianism today. Understanding its legacy helps us see how the fight for liberty is never finished, but always evolving. If you found this exploration eye-opening, be sure to like this video, subscribe for more deep dives into history's hidden truths, and share your thoughts in the comments. How do you see the American Revolution influencing the world we live in now? Let's keep the conversation going.